Welcome back. This is our final session for our block of the month, and we're going to go over finishing touches. We have all our borders on, and the only thing we have left to do is to mark our top and bottom borders and get those stitched. Doing more borders means, oh boy, more math, but don't worry, I'm going to do it for you. Your width of your quilt should measure, if you recall, between 52 to 54 inches. We need to find a number that equally divides into that. So if we took the number 54, which is what it should be before we quilted it, we can divide 9 into that very easily and come up with 6. That sounds like a good number to me, so let's work with that. Let's first put a pin in the center width of this border, and from that pin measure 3 inches out from each side. That'll give you your first 6-inch block that is equally centered in your border. From there, go ahead and mark 6-inch increments away from those lines. Now when you get to the end, you're going to have 6, 5, 4, should be much less than that. Just go ahead and draw a line where the border is going to end to make it even with the side borders. On the bottom edge of the border, we need to mark little tick marks at the center of all these sections. So therefore, 3 inches from each line, mark a little line. This will give us a guide when we're using our rulers to do the quilting. Before we get too far though, we want to stitch down the bathet border just to keep it in place so that we don't have any slipping and sliding when we start to do the wider border. And we're going to do that by using the straight edge of your ruler, stitch in the ditch along the seam between the wide border and the bathet border, and then where the blocks of the bathets join, stitch up to the first border, in this case it's the orange stripe, and back down again. Now you don't have to worry about going across the top, because when we did the flip-in stitch before, when we were adding the borders, the orange is already stitched top and bottom. So right now all we're doing is the bottom of the bathets and the stitching in between. And it's easy just using your straight edge ruler, taking your time, go up to that first border and then back down again, and then go on from there. To start this border, we're going to make a series of curves. It almost is going to look like sailboat sails going across this border, and we're going to go from the top left-hand corner to the bottom tick mark, and we're going to stitch, and then we're going to turn the ruler the opposite way and go from that tick mark back up to the top right-hand corner. You're going to continue in that manner all the way across until you get the border completely stitched. I think we've done enough ruler work in this project that you do realize that you need to keep the ruler a 1/4 of an inch away to allow for the foot, so that you can be hitting the exact corners and the tick marks as you do this. Now don't let that one chalk mark there mislead you. It kind of bled off of one of the other ones. I am actually hitting the tick marks. So we've gone one direction, we'll flip the ruler around. We'll keep that ruler a 1/4 of an inch away from the upper part of the border, and we'll stitch until we get to the top. Turn the ruler the other way, come back down, remembering to keep the ruler a 1/4 of an inch away. And that's the beauty of this particular brand of rulers. It's exactly the same on both sides, and you'll see how nice that is when we start to fill this design in. Right now we're just putting the bare bones down for this finish. When we come in to finish it, you'll see how nice these rulers come in handy. For those who are not familiar with me and my special preference on rulers, this is the 6.5 inch ruler by Accents in Design. And you're just going to continue along with that border until you get everything finished up. Again, I want to remind you, when you're using rulers, you're not pushing the foot against the ruler. You're just letting it run along the edge of the ruler. The only thing you're doing is pushing down on the ruler itself against the quilt, and that helps you to guide the quilt. That acts as your second hand. And now when you get to the end, remember this wasn't quite 6 inches. We're just going to fudge this. So we're going to come off here as if we were going to finish the whole thing, but we're going to end right here on the line. Let's get familiar with your ruler again. If you're using the convex side, this is the line that you'll want to follow. You'll put that on each line of stitching. The concave side, you'll use this line. You'll be placing that line of the ruler on your previously stitched line to give you perfect 1/2 inch increments along the way. And you'll sew from one end of the arc to the end of the border along and fill in each sail as you go along. Then it will look something like this. Okay, let's put that into motion. We're going to come down one side of the arc about 1/2 inch, put our ruler down, keeping the line where it's supposed to be, and stitch from that arc down to the bottom of the border. Now we're going to stitch off about 1/2 inch. We're going to line our ruler line again along the stitching line, and we're going to stitch back up till we reach the line of stitching from the previous sail. You'll stitch down that sail about 1/2 inch, realign your ruler, and stitch from there back down to the end of the border. And you'll continue to fill in each sail in this way. This is when it becomes very nice to have a ruler that has the same arc to it on both sides, because you can work on either side of the ruler, whichever is comfortable for you, to achieve the same results. So not only are you learning something in this process, I have also learned a very valuable lesson. Never, ever, ever, ever do a class project on black fabric again when you're stitching with black thread. I do apologize for the poor visibility, and that's why I've tried to make up with graphics so that you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. I know it's very difficult to see, and I apologize. I'll continue to let this run just a little bit longer so that you can see how you position the ruler. What you do when you get to the end of this segment, I want you to see that, and how you get started on the next portion. So we're getting down to the finished line on this one. You don't want to get too crazy. Remember, you have a 1/4 inch border or trim that you're going to have for your binding. So don't try to get the last 1/4 inch portion in there. It's going to be covered up with your binding anyway. For example, right there, you really don't need to do that because you're not going to see it probably. But let's go back to doing the other sail. Now, we need to come down a 1/2 inch. We're going to turn the ruler around just a smidge so that we can get to where we need to be. We've got the second line on the previous stitching line. And we'll continue on with our stitching. Now I want you to notice something as you look at my hands. Do you see how I have one finger of one hand that's holding the ruler? Let's watch this again. Let's get this ruler in place. Now I have my thumb on the one side, and I have my little finger off the ruler on the other side. That's to keep the ruler stable so it doesn't slip on me while I'm stitching. This particular brand of rulers does have a Velcro strip, but unless you hold it properly, that doesn't mean it's going to hold. So keeping your fingers off the ruler slightly and holding it on both ends. I've got my fingers up at the top and my thumb down at the bottom. I'm sure that my stitching is going to be right where I want it to be because my ruler is not going to slip. I also want you to notice how I don't have a death grip on that ruler. I'm just very easily holding it down with one finger on one hand, fingertips on the other hand, and I'm just enjoying the process. Many of you, when you start doing ruler work, just work too hard at it. You push that ruler against the foot, or you push the foot against the ruler, or you push so hard on the ruler that your shoulders hurt. That's not the way this is done. Just take a gentle hold on it, get it in place, and stitch, and enjoy yourself. Okay, so let's take a little look at what we've been doing. That shows up a little bit. So now you can see how this border is going to look. It's pretty amazing what you can do with a simple curved ruler, isn't it? With that out of the way, now let's go back and finish up the Bethette border. I've already done the first block, but I'm going to show you how we're going to proceed from here. Basically, I'm stitching in a ditch around the Bethette blocks, but I want to be able to do it without having to break thread every time I finish a block. So what I'm doing is stitching only the top half and then jumping over to the next one, stitching in the ditch on that one on just the top half, and I'll continue doing this all the way down until I reach the end of the road on the Bethettes. So that's how we're going to do our first initial stitch in the ditch with the Bethette blocks. We're to come down to the side triangle, do part of that, and then skip up and do the top part. Going to come down again around the other way. We're going to do part of that triangle and then jump over to the other block. And just keep stitching like this till you get to the end of the row. Now that you've arrived at the other end, now we're going to work the same thing backwards. And we're going to meet our stitching where we left off when we were going the other direction. So we're going to come up here. I'm going to keep stitching in the ditch until we get to right where these 2 points connected. Now we'll go back and hook on to the next block. And we'll continue on in the same manner, doing the stitch in the ditch, just hooking one block to the next as we go along. This is the easiest way of doing this without having to break thread and tie off each and every block. And it makes the time go a lot quicker, especially now that we're down to the end of the wire. We want to get this thing done. And this is the last stitching that we're going to do on this quilt, except for the binding, and then you'll be done. I think most of you have done enough binding on your own that you don't need me to show you how to do that. So this will be our last session for our block of the month. I've enjoyed immensely working with you. I can't wait to see all your finished quilts. So keep me posted how you're doing. Keep posting them in a group. Although this is our last lesson for this year, because we're going to take a little break for the holidays coming up, we will be starting a new free motion quilting project in January. So I hope you come back and join us then. Once again, thank you for making this teacher a very happy lady. Bye.